This is Steve Williams with the Right Approach Consulting, and I'm really excited to have Bob Duke as a guest today. Bob's an industry veteran and a good friend of mine. Bob, I was thinking back, and I think you and I first met in 1981.
Steve, I think you're right, but I wasn't willing to admit that on the air.
Oh, now it's on. Now it's on tape. How does it feel to be a 40-year veteran?
Well, the industry has been awfully good to me as well as been to you. It's been exciting. There's a lot of growth, a lot of technology changes from the beginning when I started before printed circuit boards were plated to the multiple different layers and the different materials available in the industry. Things have changed considerably. Of course, all for the good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Bob is the president of American Standard Circuit's new global sourcing division. Tell us a little bit about that, Bob.
Happy to. ASC, American Standard Circuits, decided not too long ago that adding a global sourcing division would allow its customers to potentially take advantage of low-cost country sourcing that they otherwise would not be exposed to. A lot of very big companies have agents in Asia, have divisions there. We get that. We're ideally hoping to service the smaller customers who really haven't got that capability and would need some help doing so. So we created a division. You've said it, ASC Global Sourcing. And so far, that was pretty much the beginning of the year of 2023. Things are going very well. A lot of established sources, customers, and orders. So it's worked out pretty well.
You know, American Standard Circuits has always had some kind of a presence in Asia themselves, but you're bringing a whole bunch of other commodities to the table, right?
I am. In fact, Steve, as you pointed out, ASC, although very much involved in printed circuit boards, a portion of the circuit boards they deal with today, and not a very big portion, but a portion of it, about 20%, come from Asia to begin with. So they'll buy on behalf of their customer, put together great pricing, make sure the quality and such is there, inventory that product, and support those customers who need those services. The global sourcing division ideally is not only involved in just printed circuit boards, but we're also involved in other electronic type products that would help an OEM or a contract manufacturer save some money. And those products are transformers, wire harnesses, and cable assemblies. Of course, we've said printed circuit boards, but metal fabrications would be stamping, extrusions, die casting, CNC machining, in addition to plastic injection molding, blow molding, and other types of molding that are there as well. And that doesn't preclude us from looking for sources outside of that arena that are not electronic necessarily, or a part of a box build that a customer just needs some help with.
Sure.
So we're really covering all aspects of what you can do in the global sourcing arena.
That's a pretty broad spectrum of commodities. That's, I don't think anybody else out there is really doing that kind of a service offering. So I'm excited to see how this takes off. When people think of global sourcing, they think of China, but you don't think of it that way, right?
No, we don't. In fact, quite honestly, low-cost country sourcing doesn't only come from China. Ideally, we're involved with companies in Vietnam, India. You would include Taiwan now with China, or at least China would have you think that. But we've got sources in many other countries just outside of China for sure.
How would you characterize the global sourcing climate right now? I mean, you've been in the business for 40 years. How would you characterize it now as opposed to the last 10 or 20 years?
Global sourcing Well, let's acknowledge that we've been doing business, the United States, with China even before they opened their doors for free trade around the world. At the end of the day, the country has provided its very valuable services to companies in the United States. Ideally, now with tariffs that we're having to deal with, China is not necessarily the best location. But at the end of the day, there's still a good solution in addition to the other countries we've mentioned. The issues we've got now, along with COVID, along with the political climate that we've got between the two governments, there's certainly some pressure that is worrying many of the customers that we deal with, in which case the other countries are a safe haven, if you will. Not near as many job shops in these other countries, and not nearly as developed a uh, uh, the availability as far as material goes and infrastructure, but they're getting better and better. India is a very favored nation for the United States and developing quite nicely. I'm happy to say that we've got a pretty big program going on right now to identify additional suppliers over and above those that we've got and we're currently using today. And I'm really looking for India to be a country that we're going to be able to rely on, and maybe even more so than China. I will tell you, though, that China's not going away. There
Right.
are a number of people who look at it and simply say the risk is maybe a little higher and we're not comfortable with it, but we're solving that problem or dealing with those concerns by making sure that we've got more inventory on hand. And what that means is if something goes south, and we do have very serious problems with China over where it is that we're at now, and you can't get product, we've got 6 months and maybe even more of product that would allow a customer to be able to move that business, allow us to move it elsewhere,
Mm.
or if they wanted to reshore it, they could do that themselves, maybe even go back to a current supplier and be in a position to keep that supply chain going. But although there's a concern, I believe that's a little bit lower risk. However, we have to take that into consideration.
Of course, you're talking about the China-Taiwan tension and the U.S.-China relationship, right? When you talk about what's going on now.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
that's exactly. It's all over the news. In fact, you turn on any channel, any given moment, we're worried about what's happening in Taiwan and are we going to war with China to protect our allies in Taiwan.
I was going to ask you next, are you getting any feedback from your customers on that? But you just had mentioned that they're not as concerned as you might think.
Not all of them are because we are still getting orders for the suppliers that we're using in China. So
Mhm.
that tells you that guardedly, perhaps they're splitting a business, and that is an opportunity to mitigate your risk somewhat. Uh, you give the better, lower cost supplier maybe 60 or 70% of the business while still maintaining some business at a local level with somebody you're very comfortable with, just to make sure you can still take advantage of pricing and that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, which is really not a bad strategy.
Sure. So you don't see this really impacting global sourcing at this point
I
very
don't.
much.
Well, if we were only in China,
Mm.
we would have less business than we have today. But there are still customers out there that simply say, you know what, we're willing to take that risk. Our material costs depend on what it is that you're doing for us price wise. And I get that. And so at the end of the day, I believe that while we're doing the right thing, adding other countries and other suppliers in those countries really makes sense for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you'd mentioned inventory before. Are you guys offering any other kind of supply chain program or just inventory stocking?
Well, Steve, we have warehouses in Hong Kong. We have a local warehouse in West Chicago. Uh, our strategy in pricing, our pricing model, if you will, allows us to quote the customer's estimated annual usage. and we use that as a base, and we determine an appropriate MOQ, minimum order quantity.
Okay.
That can be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months and maybe even 9 months. And what that'll do for us is allow us to put that material in stock when it arrives, ship the customer, if it were 6 months, for example, ship the customer a month's worth, keep an eye on what that quantity starts at and what it is every month, supply a report to the customer, and then before we reorder, we get down to perhaps, let's say, a couple of months worth, and then be in a position to reorder again that same MOQ and keep that continuity of supply. So kind of a max min inventory, if you will. And what that does for everybody is it gives us a little bit more confidence in, well, we've got 6 months worth of material, so if something is going to happen, we've got time to react. And at the same time, we can ship this product from stock. The customer isn't waiting for a steamship or air freight coming in at very expensive rates, if you will. They can get that product that's in stock within 24 or 48 hours normally, and really be happy with that kind of a program. So that we have found works very well, and the customers are quite comfortable signing up to that on products that we know revisions aren't changing rapidly. We don't purchase, as a rule of thumb, anything beyond what we're given an order for. So if we limit the MOQ to 600 pieces, we're not buying any more than 600 at a time. We don't want to make that commitment and have the customer be concerned later that we've gone beyond purchase order limits, if you will.
Okay. When now you've been in boards like we talked about a while, and you started out for probably half your career in board shops, running sales departments. How long have you been global sourcing?
I took on that role in a prior company I owned. Been involved in contract manufacturing for a number of years, as well as the printed circuit board manufacturing, as you've stated earlier. And as you well know, the contract manufacturing business, we were more of a box build kind of a company. So we were supplying more than just printed circuit board assemblies. And in that box build arena, our plastic housings, our wire harnesses and cables and transformers, and all the different things that we've mentioned earlier in the presentation. All of those suppliers that I've worked with for probably the last 20 years now are now a part of the ASC Global Sourcing Network.
Okay.
They've all had to resubmit, the ISO documents and get ASC'd, if you will. But at the end of the day, all of those suppliers carry forward. So not only the relationships that were long-term, but we aren't starting from scratch. So this is really kind of a continuation of what I've been doing for really the last 20 years.
That's a great segue. One of the advantages you've got is exactly what you just said. You've got personal relationships with the owners, with the top managing directors, with the people that you can make a phone call and make things happen. Somebody that's not using a service like you, one of the smaller guys, they may go over there and audit somebody and agree, but they don't have that relationship that you've got. That's a game changer. It's a definite advantage.
Here's what's going to happen. I give you a nice example. Invariably, all of these products are custom. Nothing really ever comes off the shelf. With that is a manufacturing process that goes along with it. And while day to day, we get to deal with a customer service person or somebody assigned to our account. And, you don't like to admit it, but periodically something goes wrong. Either material isn't available or something happens in the manufacturing process, and your elevation process, if you're only dealing with customer service, stops maybe with the customer service manager. And ideally, you're not in a position to really go to elevate beyond that level. And you're really stuck with what it is they come up with as a solution. What we're able to do, and I would admit not terribly often, but when we have to, you can talk to the owner who we're intimate with and be able to say, listen, here's the situation. We understand what your team has stated. Can we get you to put your hand in and see whether or not you can help mitigate the issue that we're dealing with? And more often than not, we get an improvement. And that's a huge option because we're not letting our customer down. We weren't let down. And early on, we knew, because I have had some failures before we got smart to this, and really felt like if you can't meet the owner of the company, we're not important enough to be a customer.
Exactly.
So every single supplier that we deal with, we've got that relationship with at that level.
Like I said, that's a definite advantage.
Yeah. In fact, I'll be leaving next Wednesday on the 21st, and my trip will last through July 10th.
Wow.
I'll be visiting over 20 suppliers and spending a great deal of time with factory tours, getting reacquainted with improvements they've made, and having a business meeting, whether it's a lunch or a dinner, with the owner of the company in every one of the visits that we're talking about.
Sure. Are you looking to add new suppliers or just get updated on your current supply base?
Well, if I were to tell you we have 70 suppliers today, and that I'm only visiting 20,
Okay.
it'll be another trip or two before I'm in a position to get back with everybody. But these are the suppliers that we're doing business with today.
So 70 suppliers. So talk just a little bit about what your process is when you get a program of matching that program to the appropriate supplier. What kind of things do you look at?
Well, first of all, to be a supplier, there's a rigorous procedure that we go through. Now, ideally, the suppliers that were brought on from my prior knowledge and working in the industry,
Right.
we've had to get them reacquainted and get the proper paperwork and such filled out to be a part of the ASC organization.
Okay.
But if you were to bring a new supplier on, we would take a market basket. Let's say it's a new commodity, somebody that we're not already doing business with in that commodity. We would search for the right size company. Bigger is not always better. So if we start off by identifying the right sized company, and I'm really talking more about low volume, high mix, medium volume, and not necessarily the high volume suppliers. Those suppliers, we probably aren't going to get the time of day. Their factories are good, they look nice, but we're not going to get the attention, being a smaller customer of theirs, than the big guys get. And one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we're treated appropriately based on who we are and our size.
Right.
And so that part of it is a very key element. Now, beyond that, capabilities make a lot of sense also. Do they have the right equipment? Are they ISO? And are they really ISO? And the question,
I know what you mean.
And the question then becomes, like the Better Business Bureau we have in the United States, we subscribe to a system within China, for example, that really provides some of the same information.
Okay.
We can look at who the owners of the company are. We can find out how long they've been in business. We can find out a lot of things, what their financials look like, or at least get a feel for it. Are they properly financed? Once we get an understanding that we chose the right supplier, we go through the trouble now of putting a market basket together. And that would be if, say, for example, as transformers, give them 10 or 15 different custom transformers to quote, and then look at what their pricing looks like based on what we know to be a norm for that particular type of product. And I will tell you, my experience has been a supplier wants to know whether or not you're schooled and knowledgeable about the product they're trying to sell you.
Sure.
And if you're not, the price tends to be a little bit higher. If you know enough about the product and know enough that they believe you know about the product, then you're a lot better off at getting the right pricing. Now,
Okay.
pricing is really important. However, it's not near as important as quality systems.
Okay.
Uh, we can get a really low cost, and if we can't pass uh, the approvals for first articles, then we've wasted a lot of time. So in this mix of things that we look for, we want to make sure that they've got everything in place on the quality side, because there's nothing worse than getting bad product from overseas uh, and now having to react only after you've gotten it. Now, we deal with source inspection and a lot of other things to prevent that, but based on my experience, having products come in that are bad and uh, don't meet the print is not something you want to find out later. It's something you need to find out sooner.
Right. Total cost, right?
Yep, yep.
So, Bob, you've got these 70 suppliers in your portfolio. Say you've got 7 sheet metal fabricators, and a customer gives you a new program. Other than price, what else do you look at to make sure you're getting the right program to the right supplier fit?
One of the things that's important is, since the metal stamping companies vary somewhat in terms of maybe the volume they're interested in. If we've got something that's medium volume and yet one of the stampers is a high volume stamper, then that's really not a piece of business that they are going to be interested in long term. They
Okay.
may be interested in quoting it because maybe they're not very busy right that moment. But
Mm-hmm.
in time, everybody goes back to what they really like to do and do well. So high volume opportunity comes in, and you may end up having to take the back seat to something that is perhaps more important than your program. So
Right.
we not only match the technology, but we match the volume with the supplier as well. Now, one thing that's important. We know what a sweet spot is in the circuit board industry. It's
Mm-hmm.
what a factory does and does very well. Whereas if you're a high layer count factory, or at least your advertising says that, but you and I tour that factory only to find out that they're doing primarily 2-layer and 4-layer, you're not going to be very confident that you can put a high layer count multi-layer in that operation. So we do kind of the same thing. We want to make sure that the part we're putting in isn't over the sophistication level of the company we're trying to source it with. And we want to make sure also we're sourcing it with like companies in that arena. So if we may
Sure.
start with 7, it could be that only 3 are really appropriately quoted.
Okay. That makes sense. And that's so true. I mean, you go to a board shop and you're looking for sequential lamination, and it's on their brochure, but when you really dig into it, they've built it like 3 times, right? But they built it, it worked, and they put it on their brochure as a capability. Those are not the guys you want to go to for sequential lamination.
Yeah, and the same holds true with all of the commodities that we talk about. You really have to be careful matching those commodities with the right supplier.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, as we wrap up, Bob, can you share with us what the long-term vision is for your group? What are you going to be doing next? I know you talked about expanding your local footprint with resources, the places you're sourcing. What kind of things are you working on in the future, say a year from now?
Steve, as I look into the crystal ball, obviously growth is really important. Having the suppliers that we need in other countries, just as, if you will, as a preventative measure. And who knows, maybe it's not preventative. Maybe it's just good business to make sure that we have these sources elsewhere. However, we will probably be expanding our offering. One of the things that we've gotten an order on recently, and we've got to be a little bit more open-minded to this, that beyond electronics or the commodities that would serve an OEM in the electronics arena, or a box build type company,
Sure.
uh, contract manufacturer, there are a lot of other companies out there that don't have the resources, and they may not be involved in electronics. So it doesn't hurt to be opening up our global sourcing company to non-electronic companies, if you will. I
Sure.
was given an opportunity just recently with an automotive
Hmm.
kind of a company, somebody that supports the body shop industry, if you will. And they had a wire rack that they were interested in having us take a look at. Well, from my previous experience, I was, strangely enough, was able to provide a wire rack custom for a company here in the United States. And as it turns out, I was able to go back to that same supplier and have a custom wire rack produced less expensively than the existing current supplier at this company. So it turns out that while if it's working for one company and it's not electronic, there are other opportunities out there for us. But what I really want to make sure we focus on is let's cover the electronics industry, the ASC customer base, and those customers that need help in global sourcing on the electronic side. And then we'll move forward to looking at other possible companies and other industries.
Outstanding. That's exciting.
I'll tell you, I'm up at night. I talk to overseas on a regular basis, and everybody that's involved in this whole process has the same vision I do. Our CEO has been wonderful to work with. No holds barred. I've got all the support you could possibly imagine in a new division, which is really important. The financials will allow us to be successful. I will tell you that for sure.
That's great. I mean, I know ASC quite well, and it's a fantastic company you got hooked up with here.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Bob, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy, and carving out a half an hour or 40 minutes is pretty tough sometimes, but I really appreciate it. Good luck with the global sourcing division.
Steve, thank you. I appreciate every opportunity I get to tell the global sourcing story. I'm not short for words, as you can see.
I know. You like to be on camera.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
All right. Steve Williams with The Right Approach Consulting for Bob Duke and American Standard Circuits. Thanks for watching.